Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome again to Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Uh, don't be fooled by the fancy name. It's just me and some baseball cards. And today, it's going to be 3 baseball cards and an amazing story of a particularly interesting individual from the deadball era of baseball, Mike Donlin. Mike Donlin has a story that's going to take a little bit to tell, and then we'll take a look at his cards from the T206 and tell some stories about those. So I pulled out this book. It's a wonderful book. It's called the T206 Collection, The Players and Their Stories. It was kind of an expensive book, as you can see. It's like a coffee table book, hardcover, glossy, all that. But what's great about it is it has stories about each of the players. And Donlin, of course, gets his own page here. So I'll just read from this, and then we'll talk about Donlin a little more in detail. It says, Turkey Mike Donlin could have been a Hall of Famer if not for his extravagant lifestyle. A notorious drinker and playboy, his off-the-field antics drastically altered a career that could have been great. Donlin batted over 310 of his 12 seasons. His best year was 1905 when he was team captain and batted a lofty 356 to help the Giants win the World Series. We'll talk about 1905 in a few minutes. Donlin was a power hitter, finishing in the top 10 in home runs for 5 seasons, nicknamed Turkey for his red neck and starting style of walking. Donlin cut short his own career. He ended up in prison for public drunkenness in 1902. That's sort of early in his career, but causing the Orioles to release him. We'll talk about that. That's not entirely true. He also took several seasons off to act in vaudeville with his first wife, and we'll talk about her, and had lost his edge by the time he returned to the game. He managed the Memphis Chickasaws in the Southern Association in 1917 and later scouted for the Boston Braves and New York Giants. Donlin dabbled in silent movies after his career went silent. A little more complicated than that, but anyway, that's the gist of it about Donlin from this terrific book. But let's look at his numbers here. How's that? There we go. This is the front page of Donlin's baseball reference page. As you can see, he was born 1878 in Peoria, Illinois. His family moved to Buffalo when he was a small child, and sadly and tragically, both of his parents were killed in a train accident when Donlin was like 8 years old. So he in Buffalo. So he scraped by as a orphan. Eventually, as a young teen, got a job working on a cross-country train rail, and ended up taking the train to California and staying there and getting off and never coming back to Buffalo. So Donlin starts playing semi-pro ball in his teens, and he's good. He's both a pitcher and a hitter, but also a self-promoter. So he ends up getting himself in one of the San Jose or Santa Cruz newspapers, gets himself some notoriety, gets scouted, and comes to play for St. Louis in 1899. He's scouted by St. Louis. He comes in as a pitcher. He's not so good as a pitcher. He's not so good as a fielder either. So they stick him in the outfield. He plays 2 seasons in St. Louis, and then there's 1901. You see that BLA. That's the Baltimore Orioles, the original Baltimore Orioles. Played 2 seasons in the American League, and their second season, I believe, was 1901. Was the year. You see, Donlin had a terrific year. He batted 340. And 33 stolen bases. He ended up, like Baltimore, sort of crashing at the end of the season. He had a public drunkenness situation. He went to jail for 6 months, did 1 month. His manager in Baltimore was John McGraw, and the Baltimore franchise folded, leaving room in the league for a team that would become the New York Yankees. The New York Highlanders sort of came out of the ashes of the Baltimore team. It wasn't exactly a move. It was a crash and then another team replacing them. And his manager, John McGraw in Baltimore, will come back to be important in Donlin's story. 1902 and 1903, he plays for Cincinnati and becomes really good. As you can see, again, 351, 329. And in 1904, I guess it starts going sour in Cincinnati because Donlin was Donlin. And his manager in Baltimore, his former manager in Baltimore, is now the manager of the New York Giants. And in 1904, John McGraw acquires Donlin to play for his Giants, which will pay off for McGraw abundantly in 1905, as Donlin has that amazing season that we talked about. Batted .356, captained the team, 33 steals, 80 RBIs, 124 runs scored, 216 hits. If there was an MVP that year, he probably would have won the MVP. But he takes the Giants to the World Series where they are victors, and he is now a World Series champion. So Donlin is at the top of his game at that point. And we'll come back to the stats, but I just want to flip over to, there's the cards. We'll come back to these. But there's Donlin playing for Cincinnati. I believe that was 1901 or 1900. That is a classic photo, as you can see. And here he is with Mabel Hite, H-I-T-E. Mabel Hite was a Broadway star who married Mike Donlin and then took him away from the game because the two of them put together a Broadway show, which was a hit. And it was about a baseball player. I think it was called Stealing Home or something like that. Anyway, so Donlin comes into spring training the following season, and he's now a Broadway star. And in 1906, he gets hurt, misses much of the year, but then starts acting on Broadway. 1907 comes into spring training with the Giants and tells them, I want enough money that's more money than I'm making on this Broadway show. And the Giants are like, sorry, we're not paying you that much. So Mike Donlin takes off the entire 1907 season, a year and a half removed from winning the World Series. He's suddenly not in the game anymore, traveling with his wife, doing a Broadway show. And ultimately, the following season, 1908, the Giants give in to his wishes, pay him a lot of money, and he comes back and he has another fabulous season, hitting .334 with 106 RBIs, 198 hits. So that's what we're talking about here. Mike Donlin basically getting his way with the Giants in 1908. But he again leaves in 1909 and goes back to Mabel Hite. And sadly, Mabel Hite was ill, and Mabel Hite contracted cancer, and she passed away that year. So Donlin is now without a wife, without a baseball team, and he comes back in 1911. He plays for the Giants. He's okay, but they end up releasing him. He goes on to play for Boston, where he has a pretty good season. And then in 1912, he's in Pittsburgh, and that's where his career pretty much ends. You could see a 1914 appearance with the Giants. That came about because he went on a international baseball tour with John McGraw as the manager, and McGraw said, hey, why don't you come back? He came back, and he couldn't really play anymore. So Donlin, interesting story. As you can see, there he is on the Pirates later on in his career. But Donlin had a penchant for drinking, as we know, and one of his best friends in the world was the famous actor John Barrymore. Barrymore was the sort of the father of a series of Barrymore family members that were Hollywood stars, all the way up to his, I believe his granddaughter is Drew Barrymore. So John Barrymore takes Donlin after his career is over and brings him to Broadway, and then brings him to Hollywood. And so Donlin ends up appearing in a whole bunch of movies in that time period. Some of them are silent, and then ultimately he ends up in some baseball movies, and he ends up in some talkies. And so he's pretty much a star for in Hollywood for a while. And then he ends up, let me go back to his numbers. His first page right here. He's in 1933, which isn't that old. He's 55 years old. He dies of a heart attack. He's buried actually in West Long Branch, New Jersey. I don't know why that is. That's down down the shore a little bit. So anyway, let's. This is a baseball channel, so let's talk about Donlin's baseball cards. So these are his 3 cards in the T206 series. Now, T206, obviously, to get 3 cards in the series, you got to be a star, and Donlin was definitely a star. I have the T206 Donlin Piedmont 150. That's the what's known as the fielding variation. As you can see, he's got his glove on, and he looks like he's standing in the outfield. And as you can see, also that card says the Charles Bray collection, which is super cool because Charles Bray is like Mount Rushmore of baseball card collectors and dealers. He was sort of the heir apparent to the original card collectors, whose name Jefferson Burdick. He was like Burdick's right-hand man. And so Charles Bray ends up taking over Burdick's magazine, and he was basically is the first real baseball card dealer, and he had a huge collection of about 200,000 cards, and this was one of them. So it's kind of cool to have the Bray card as one of my Donlin cards. Let's go back to, we'll stay on the cards for a second, but let's go to me. Here's that card, the Charles Bray collection, Mike Donlin fielding. It is a PSA 1, and the reason is because I think it's in here. There's a pinhole somewhere along here. Otherwise, presents really nicely. I believe I bought this in an REA auction several years ago for less than $100, which was cool. So the second card in the Donlin series is the fielding. I'm sorry, the batting. Let's go back to his cards here. You see that's a Piedmont. There's a 350, I believe. Yeah. And it's with bat, as you can see. He's got a bat. But it's a SGC 3, and it's a really nice 3, as you can see. Pretty well centered. Nice clean borders. I think there's a little bit of a nudge on the upper right corner there that pulls the grade down, but otherwise this presents as a really high quality. Getting a 3 in a T206 is pretty much upper grade, high grade. So Donlin's fielding is the left. The batting is in the middle. On the right is the sitting, which I just recently purchased. I bought this from my friend Gary, who is known as Ballpark Memories on Twitter. I believe it's at Ballpark FW. I'll put this down in the description along with a link to a few other things here. But so let's go back to me here, and you can see this is the Donlin seated. The cool thing about this card is the back. It is a sovereign back. It's the only sovereign back I have in my entire collection. So nice to get that. Not only the Charles Bray on the fielding, but also the sovereign back on the seated version of Donlin's 3 cards. And there you have the backs, the 150 on the Bray card, the 350 on the batting, and the sovereign back on the seated. What other slides we got here? There's Donlin again with Mabel. There he is playing later on his career. And there's the T206 collection book that I showed you earlier. I'll see if I can put maybe an Amazon link down for that one. But so that's the story of Turkey Mike Donlin, one of the greatest players of the deadball era, whose life story is more interesting than his baseball story. And his 3 T206 cards, part of my collection, and happy to have them. And so we'll see you back here next week. I'm actually going to put this video up later today. It's the morning on Saturday, because I'm going up to the Westchester Card Show. Promised to be 500 tables, and if my math is correct, it's the 3rd largest baseball card show in history. So hope to have some video from the show and maybe some new cards. But we'll see you back here next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.